I know, I'm starting 5 minutes early. It's okay. I think I got it going. All right. I'll talk about those in just a second. Figure out where they've hidden things today on here. Ba-ba-ba. And if you're just joining us, of course, tell us who you are, where you're from. Feel free to post a question. And I'm assuming it'll take a few minutes for folks to get on here. All right. It looks like it's the same as last time. So presumably, I know how to do this. We're going to get started right at 6 o'clock. And I'm going to get myself organized here as we go. There we go. All right. So, and if you're, yay, somebody showed up. Oh, there you are. Awesome. Welcome. I think I know where you are, and feel free to post any questions. So, if you're seeing this on the recording, feel free to fast forward about 5 minutes because I don't know how to edit these things. Unfortunately, it's on my list of things to learn how to do. And then I'll bust right into my station identification, and then we'll get into the questions. We got some interesting ones today, and lots of time for other people to post. So go ahead and join the conversation, and we'll do our best to answer all the questions here for you. All right, I am going to stall endlessly. Been out digging all day, and so I am probably a little dehydrated and not thinking clearly, so you never know what's going to happen. All right, we got 3 really good questions sitting there, and if you don't know it, oh, no, wrong shoulder. There we go. Oh, how do I do that? There we go. Herb Day. I got to point everything backwards. There it is. No, there. Herb Day. Next Saturday, May 2nd. In case you don't know, to fast forward 5 minutes to get past all this good stuff. It's going to be another exciting Herb Day. It is our 20th annual. We've gotten some decent press on there, so hopefully you've seen some of it. And Herb Day, we've got 2 free lecture areas. It's always awesome. It's required for our senior herb students, Western herb students. They have to do a presentation. They have to make a product. They'll be out there on their own tent hawking their wares, which is always entertaining because they do such an... It's really... They're always terrified going into it, and they do such an awesome job putting things together. It's partly kind of forcing them into that paradigm of creating their first product sometimes and getting the labeling right. And of course, I'm going to make my usual batch of really strange foods. So there'll be some black chicken white phoenix soup. There will be some chicken feet that I'll cook up the night before, just tapping into my Bahamian roots there. And a bunch of weird Chinese things like jellyfish salad and bitter melon stir fry. Some 8 treasures congee, and honestly, I don't really know what else I'm going to pull out. So we're going to get started here in just a second, right at 6 o'clock. So I got 2 minutes. If you're just joining us, I see a couple more people just jumped on. Let us know who you are, where you're from, and if you got any questions, we will throw them into the mix. I always like getting as many questions as I can in the start so I can kind of condense lots of ones that people mailed in along with the ones that are popping up. Sometimes they group together very nicely. All right, counting down to a minute to go, and we'll get all kinds of good stuff going. Trying to get the best shot. There we go. That's way better angle for Herb Day. I can't read anything, but I don't need to. So hang with us. I'm going to go into my mad spiel here in just a second. What classes do we have coming up? Well, we just had that one, so there we go. We've got a couple of cool things coming up. All right. Tick-tock, tick-tock. And I'm going to turn that down so it doesn't drive us nuts. Clicking through the whole stupid thing. Yay, there we go. All right. So I'm going to call it 6 o'clock on the dot. If you don't know it, I'm Bob Linde from Traditional School of Herbal Studies, acupuncture and herbal therapies, and probably a couple of other things that I can't think of. And I'm here in sunny St. Petersburg, Florida, in our apothecary. So you see the wall of cool Chinese herbs behind me. there's just as big a wall in front of me that you can't see, full of all the cool Western, or I always say all the herbs that aren't Chinese. So we have things from Africa, Central South America, North America, and Europe, of course. And so all of those are available to anybody. You can come in and say, hey, I need $1 worth of chamomile, and we'll measure that good stuff out for you. If you're like, ooh, what do you got to cure cancer? We're going to tell you an appointment, because so many of the problems people come in asking questions about really are complex issues. That's a little bit of what we'll talk about today. That we need to look at medications and safety. I'm actually shocked at how much advice people give out over the internet and so forth without getting any actual information. If you don't know it, it's all about Herb Day. So not this weekend, but a week from Saturday is our 20th annual National Herb Day celebration. It goes from 10 to 4 p.m. I, of course, highly recommend you get here early, get here right at 10 o'clock. The first classes will kick off at 10:15. I'm doing a edible medicinal herb walk for about 45 minutes, right at 10:15. We'll have about 30 vendors here. All are herb related, which always makes it fun. And after Herb Day, we got lots of cool classes coming up. We've got going on through May, Mushroom Medicine Making Series, the 5 Seasons of TCM series, Anatomy for the Herbalist, Ayurvedic System. In June, we've got Digestion and Nutrition through Ayurvedic Herbalism. June 5th, and I will do this online as well. You do need to go onto the website to register. On June 5th, I'm doing Herb-Drug Interactions, which I try to do that at least once a year. And that one will be a large class, both in person and online. So if you're here in the area, please register online, because we will have a limited number of seats. If you're going to do it remotely, just let us know. We can always change it, and everybody gets the recording of that as well. And then, I forgot I was doing that. TCM, we're doing auricular therapy. That's just an evening class on the 11th. And I'm doing an open class that's available to anyone on topical herbs for pain. That's an all-day class. And lots of other good stuff. If you don't know it, acupuncture and herbal therapies. We have, I think, 4 acupuncture physicians, a couple of herbalists. All of us do herbalism here, as well as kind of a spiritual energy worker as well. We've also got a reduced rate student clinic here. Monday night is our acupuncture interns coming from coming from Dragon Rises, the local acupuncture school that starting this summer I will be teaching Western herbalism for. And Tuesday night is our Western herb interns in their final year of school. And on Wednesday night is our Chinese herbal interns. We also, it's not my creation, but I help support a free clinic on the first and third Friday in downtown St. Pete at the Sunshine Center. You can Google the Sunshine Senior Center. It's open to everybody. It's community style. And just come as you are. It's helpful to wear loose clothing or shorts and t-shirts so we can get arms and legs to do good stuff. For my students, they oftentimes show up to help. That's all I can think of. We'll be at Green Thumb Festival this weekend. Also, I'm super excited to be teaching at Medicine's the Earth Conference. It's coming up really soon. Note the discount code. I believe that's still good. I'm super psyched. We're back at our old location at whatever the center is, where they always had it for the last who knows how many years. Beautiful hiking in the area. All my favorite herbalists are there. And so I'm going to be teaching 2 classes that I'm super excited about. One is on hypermobility, Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, kind of how we can recognize it, the different manifestations, and more importantly, how we can use herbs to help support that. Yay! Hey, Stevie. Whoops, I just lost your question. Where did it go? Oh, there we go. Oh, everybody's on there. And the other one is going to be on hidden food sensitivities, looking in particular at some things like latex and a few of the lesser known ones. And then I'm going to be on a panel discussion on how herbs can help support us old farts as we see, everything from some of the senior herbalists are passing away. Some of the other folks are trying to find their way into the more respected new schools opening up, all kinds of things like that. So I'm really excited about having 3 different presentations there at Medicine of the Earth, and ultimately just hiking around, and I'm going to turn it into a vacation. Ah! And Heidi, yep, be there, be square. We're going to have a blast up there. Pedicularis. Yep. All right, Stevie, I got you for that. And if you're just joining us, please let us know who you are, where you're from, and if you've got any cool Western or Chinese herbal questions. I am here to vomit my stuff at you. Pedicularis. All right. So, actually, I'll start with you, Stevie. Why not? So pedicularis, it's funny, it grows around the world. It's southeast U.S. I think it goes all the way up the eastern seaboard, probably a few other places. It does grow in Asia and China in particular. It's used, and it's funny. There's different species, obviously, on different regions, but used for very, I'm going to say, similar functions. You'll find in every culture they have a unique little twist on it. Oops, wait a second. Oh, yeah. Yeah, I know. It's not enough spoken about the hypermobility, so I will babble on about that. So the pedicularis, I like it specifically for muscular pain, but it can also be used for connective tissue. I've used it more for kind of chronic pain, think like fibromyalgia pain, where it's like large areas of muscles. I've added it to formulas where, not as a single, but usually in formula, I'll add it to, I'll add an herb to guide the pedicularis to the location. So if I had some muscle pain or tension in my back, I would combine the pedicularis with I don't want to cheat and use the Chinese. I might use eukomia or duho. If I'm doing Western herbs, shutuan is not Japanese, not wheat. Oh, I'm having a brain cramp on that. So I'll type the Chinese name in there. Somebody can Google that and tell me what it is. Shutuan. Oops. And anything that guides in the general area to it. I'm sure I'm not missing anything. There we go. I think I caught everybody. There we go. I got to get in the right place on the chat. There. It can be used topically. So I like combining it with Go-To Cola, specific for connective tissue. Again, for fibromyalgia, I like the pedicularis with Go-To Cola. You could add it in combination with Solomon seal if you wanted to work more on tendons. I haven't used pedicularis for nerve pain as much, but it might have a benefit along with St. John's wort if you're able to do that internally. Remember with St. John's wort, teasel, yes, thank you. I don't know why I brain cramp on that one all the time. So the teasel root is a great one to guide to the low back as well. You could use it with nerve pain with St. John's wort, with the pedicularis, but generally I just like the St. John's wort by itself. So it can be done topically, internally, tea or tincture, because it's usually the leaf we're using in the pedicularis. It does not grow great in Florida. You probably get it Gainesville North here in Florida. I've found it frequently up in North Carolina, probably North Georgia. It's pretty common. And if you're just joining us, let us know who you are, where you're from, and if you got any questions, throw them in the chat and I will add them to the queue. I don't know, Stevie, what else can I tell you about pedicularis? It's funny, even though we have it tinctured here, I think we have it dried if we still have any left. I like it because it's a good analgesic with as a tea. So many of our things, Jamaican dogwood and even calendula, can sometimes be hard to use as a tea because they need to be decocted. And for me, nothing wrong with using tinctures, but I use them less. I like using teas as a convenient, as a kind of in ritual. And so when I can get a good analgesic or pain-killing herb that I can use as just a 20-30 minute infusion, I always feel like that's a win to be able to do that. And Teasel's one of those that can easily be used in that way. I also find that Teasel's a little bitter, but it's not horrendous. So it's one, and this is what we forget so often, the idea of an herbal chew. It's funny, I don't talk about that a lot, but one of my favorite ways to take an herb medicinally, not just for an herb walk, is to grab up some and just start chewing it up. And we think about that fresh, like, oh, let's pull that herb out of the garden. But the reality is you can take herbs as a dip, as a chew, to just eat them up, yum, even if they're dry. And it's Jim McDonald, he did a video on that not too long ago that I thought was hilarious, but it's so true. And not just for mouth pain, like we've got our cool little tooth powder here that we use for tooth infection or tooth pain. But whether we're doing a digestive bitter, an analgesic herb, sinus herbs, I do this regularly. If I'm out and my sinuses, the oak pollen or something, or I ate the wrong food, I'll sit there and grab a few of the herbs up and I just chew them. And every time I feel like my sinuses are sneaking up on me, I just chew down on it once or twice, and that saliva's got everything going. You know, Popka, how you doing, Lynn? Oh, nice. I know, I got to get back at Florida Herb Conference. I haven't been there in a while, so it was always one of my favorite conferences. So I'll have to make it back there. And you're not too far away. I hope you can come over for Herb Day or something else fun one of these days when you see something exciting going on. And please let me know if you got any questions, Lynn. All right, got to double check and make sure I didn't miss anything. Hopefully that's answered all your questions and then some, Stevie. Dosage on that, kind of average dosage. I always say 5 to 15 grams as a tea is a good starting dosage for pretty much every herb. There's obviously exceptions to that. For some things go up in really high amounts, like gotu kola, we can use mango amounts of that. And other herbs we can, that has some toxicity, we have to be very careful with, like maybe something like a poke root. We've got to be cautious with those things. What else did I have on here? So it came up recently, the question of ethical... actually, I'm going to hold off on my ethical wild harvesting. That's one of my favorite subjects. So Lynn's got on there tips for going through chemo, maintaining white and red blood cells during chemo. And I will say, I'll put a few cautions on that. I think it's always good to work directly with an herbalist if you're going through chemo or any kind of cancer treatment. There are certainly a lot of herb-drug interactions that go on with most chemotherapies, I can say all chemotherapies. In particular, stay away from really bitter or really sour herbs. Those will change the way the chemotherapy processes through the body and is eliminated out of the body. I also don't recommend any kind of cleanses doing that while you're going through chemo. Usually you wait till 2 months after chemo and then you can do all kinds of things like that. I've had way too many of my friends and patients who tell me after the fact that they went through chemotherapy and that they were like, oh yeah, I juiced and did these cleanses all through it and I didn't get any side effects. The reality is, if you're doing chemo, you're supposed to get side effects. And if you didn't, that means you didn't get any of the chemo. And so doing those cleanses, they work. They push the chemo out. They push it out through the bowels most commonly. So do chemo let it do its work. And exactly right, Lynn. The biggest thing is to maintain the red and white blood cells through that process, because that's what stops most people from finishing their chemotherapy. They get really anemic, the white blood cells drop, and they have to take a couple of week pause. So we want to do it the way the most current research says we should do it, at this dose for this period of time for this particular type of cancer. My go-tos, and I shouldn't say that. I had somebody else, another acupuncturist recommended this, and they had a oncologist out of state balked at it. But in 20-something years, I've never had an oncologist not be okay with mushrooms. In particular, I really like reishi mushroom for maintaining the red blood cells, and I really like cordyceps mushrooms for maintaining the white blood cells. And depending on what brand you're using and so forth, different bottles, different dosages, different preparations. I don't have a strong opinion on that. I like fruiting body rather than mycelium. I know mycelium running, great book and all that, but most of the mycelium products is around anywhere from 20 to 50% rice, because you can't pull out these little roots, these little threads out of there. So make sure you're getting fruiting body with your mushroom products, specifically if you're trying to address chemo. Start at the bottle dosage, and every time you see your numbers start to decline a little bit, double your dosage. I don't care if you're taking handfuls of it. Just like you've got to maintain those. Of course, food becomes paramount, and one of the crappy things we see with chemotherapy is your appetite usually goes down. So, it's nice that I can say it, but in the state of Florida, at least, and many of the other states, you can now get medical marijuana. I don't like that term marijuana. I like to use cannabis. There's a whole racist history around the term marijuana. So cannabis is great as an appetite stimulant, the munchies. So I'm not even going to pretend to say I know which strains and brands and so forth, but I do prefer whole plants. I don't like extracts. So oftentimes you can go to the dispensary and say, hey, I'm going through chemo. I need something that's really going to help stimulate the appetite. So that's always a great one. Bone broth is phenomenal. And what I always say is, don't wait until your appetite tanks or your numbers tank. Start cooking it before you start chemo. Start, like maybe 2 days worth, put it in your freezer, store all of those things. Talk about friends. Your friends, I'm quite sure, want to support you through that. And so kind of having, we did that with one of our people here. We had a weekly food brigade that everybody would bring in something that was taken over to them. Because you don't have the energy, you got brain fog and all of that. It really can help people a lot. And oops. Right, yeah, it's so funny. Nothing wrong with turkey tail. I'm a huge fan of turkey tail. This is the one time I use chaga, but turkey tail has a multifunctional use, and is used with a lot of the gynecological cancers, breast cancer in particular. Chaga, and it's so funny. I know chaga is like chaga coffee and all those kinds of things. Chaga's only been talked about. It's been on the radar of herbalists and popular for maybe 25 years or so. It was really, 25 years ago, it was kind of new on the scene. They were like, ooh, there's this cool new herb. The only thing we talked about it for was cancer. And, I'm saying this word this much. I'm so getting banned on YouTube again. Dang it. Oh, well. Disclaimer. None of this is medical advice. Blah, 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 blah. You know the deal. But I like chaga. It's totally okay to do with chemo. I'd say turkey tail as well is fine to do with it. But I tend to use the chaga when I'm not using a medical intervention. So I like that as I won't call it a heavy hitter, but a strong thing towards addressing cancer when you're not doing conventional therapies. Turkey tail, honestly, it's a great one whether you're doing conventional treatment or not. It's used for a lot of different types, but specifically look at it for those gynecological cancers. Um, what else do I like for red blood cells and white blood cells? Those, while I was doing chemo, those two are my heavy hitters. Like, for real, I don't do much other than those two mushrooms. I let people go through their chemo. Acupuncture, I don't know personally any acupuncturists in the area of Apopka there. I'm sure there's some. Acupuncture sometimes can help with the white blood cells in particular, but more importantly, it helps with the nausea and vomiting. It can be really effective for that. So really looking at that team approach as you address those things. And when we come at it from a dietary standpoint, when we use acupuncture, when we use herbs, depending on where you are in that process, before you start chemo, if all you're doing is like chemo and no radiation, then like usually about 2 months after you're done with the chemo, then you start on some herbs to address, and unique to every case, but there's no single right answer. It's like, let's see what we can do safely together, or before, during, or after a particular medical intervention. Obviously, if surgery is involved, you've got to avoid, they usually have you stop everything, but specifically blood thinning herbs. But also some of the herbs may, and unfortunately there's no research on this, some of the herbs may alter sedation. So if they're putting you under general anesthesia, which would be logical, there's a little bit of paranoia. So I usually say, just do what the surgeon says. The 10 days that you have to stop stuff doesn't make that big of a difference, so that you get the surgical intervention. Chemo is where your greatest risks are of using herbs and chemotherapy together. Radiation, there's a lot of arguments about that, but the reality is, when they do radiation, they're trying to inflame the tissues. They're literally like cooking the tissues, and they're afraid if you do an anti-inflammatory while you're doing radiation, you'll negate it. It's more of a theoretical construct rather than ooh, this is a thing. So there is some research that even says, like, no, do IV vitamin C while you're going through radiation and chemo, and then it improves the outcomes. So I tend to say, like, let's treat it whatever we're seeing with the pattern through radiation, but I always acquiesce if necessary to whoever's taking the primary approach. Once the radiation's done, we can go hog wild on people. I will say acupuncture is probably the most helpful going through radiation, and again, the reishi mushroom and cordyceps, because you oftentimes have your red and white blood cells drop during radiation as well. The one thing I always ask when somebody's going to an oncologist, asking those questions, and I always say it's the scariest thing that can happen to us in the English language, sadly. And always ask the oncologist, and the nice thing about oncology, they have research to back up all their stuff. When it comes to herbs, we have some ideas, we have limited research, we have individual case reports where they're like, we had this great success with one or two things, but until we see a couple of thousand documented cases where the only thing they've done with the herbs, we don't really understand exactly what's happening. And test tube studies are not good research. And most of our stuff is test tube studies, some mice and rat studies, and so forth. So I always say, ask your oncologist, for my type of cancer, at my health status and the stage of your cancer, if I just do surgery, what's my percentage of expected outcome? If I do surgery and chemotherapy, what's my expected risk of the cancer returning? If I do all three, because the reality is a lot of times, and again, this varies dramatically. So it's so important to ask those specific questions. chemo usually has some pretty good outcomes. Surgery is the single most important. Get the stupid tumor out of you. But that only works at a stage 1, maybe stage 2. But once it starts to go to other parts and metastasize to other parts of the body, surgery then can't be your primary approach. So then chemotherapy and radiation. And depending on what the research is telling folks at that time, one of those is the first line of attack. But once you do radiation in a particular part of your body, it's usually a 5, maybe a 10% decrease in risk of return of your cancer, but you can never do radiation again as a part of the treatment in that area of your body. So if you irradiate a breast, you can never get radiation to that breast or that chest area again. So I find some people are like, nope, I want every last 0.5% success, and they do it. Some are like, maybe I want to reserve that if something comes back later on. So I always think it's important that we get hard numbers for all of that so that we can make the best decisions as we go through there. Pancreatic cancer. So that's a toughie always. So pancreatic cancer used to be a really crappy outcome. Like maybe 5% survived 1 year if you got diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. I will say in the last, I think, 5 years, that has changed so dramatically where we're now, especially if caught early, that people are getting cures, that there's a constantly increasing benefit, 5-year survivability. And that's 5-year survivability is considered a cure. So, 5 years and 1 day, cancer comes back, it's a new cancer. It's not the same one coming back. So, a little wiggle room there in the statistics, but it is one of the scarier cancers. So there's no doubt about that. And it sucks. Every time I hear it, I just cringe. But it's so funny. We had a gentleman, in my mind, he's still alive. I doubt it, honestly. But he came in, he was a older gentleman, and he's like, yep, been diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer, and it's really funny. He's like, I smoke, I drink, and I'm not stopping. And I don't know if I'm going to do any of the stuff the doctors want me to. It's like, you got to give me some herbs. And I was like, and I don't know what I can tell you. And he also didn't have any money. He might have been kind of borderline homeless, I'm not sure. And we actually ended up giving him bitter melon, suricine, which is a Caribbean herb. It does grow wild here, and it happened to be everywhere at that time. So I literally went out in the backyard because he couldn't afford the herbs. And I ripped all. I was like, go find these in your neighborhood, and you need to start eating them, but you got to eat with it because it also drops your blood sugar. And there's some very cursory research on the bitter melon to help with certain types of pancreatic cancers, and there are different types of pancreatic cancers, so some scarier than others. And every time I see him, he's like, nope, still drinking my Hennessy, I'm still smoking my cigarettes and my weed, and I'm not changing because I'm not going to be here anyway. I know he was kicking around for 1.5 years, and although he lost a little bit of weight, he seemed healthy as a horse. He seemed to be doing fine. I never could get a straight answer out of him, like, are you doing chemo, what type, but I'm pretty sure he wasn't. He never got a port put in, which is very common that they put in an easy place to put in the infusions and stuff. He never got a port, so I'm going to assume he's still alive, but I have no idea. He was a hoot, though. He was always a pleasure when he came in. It was always in a great mood. But pancreatic issues, there are many reasons for them. When we look at, part of it can be genetic things, but alcohol is the #1 thing that pisses off a pancreas. After that, it's just dumb luck. You're like, I don't drink. Well, and if you get pancreatic cancer, it's usually some kind of weird genetic thing or crappy luck. When we hear about pancreatitis and things like that, more than 50% of that comes from overconsumption of booze. So it's an argument for not indulging and certainly not overindulging. And for folks who used to drink, pancreatitis actually stays as an issue for a fairly long period of time afterwards. People can be sober 10, 20 years and their pancreas craps out later, which also sucks because they're like, they've overcome some great obstacles, and it sneaks up and bites them at some point. So the pancreas is probably I won't call it the strangest organ, but it's kind of the strangest organ because it's a gland that secretes hormones, because we have things like the islets of the Langerhans. You have to say it like a Scotsman when you say the Langerhans, which is our blood sugar regulation, that it's secreting insulin and glucagon, but we've got also all of our cool digestive enzymes that shoot into the small intestine at the common bile duct there, and a bunch of other just really unique things. I always feel like that's the coolest organ, but because it's such a complex set of stuff, it has a lot of different parts that can get out of whack on there sometimes. So it's one of those things, it's funny, I'm going to be teaching this class for my senior students in, not this Sunday, but the day after Herb Day, coming up on May 2nd. You can look at the thing, there it is, over my shoulder. What we do on the Sunday after Herb Day, besides going like, how was Herb Day? Did you guys learn anything? And usually really positive comments. But I call it the oh shit day. Like, as an herbalist, we don't get the same depth and breadth of medical training that, say, a doctor or even as a nurse might get. We get some good stuff, but it's more gross anatomy and some fairly basic stuff. And it's also important, like, people come to us when they're really sick. And so we need to know, we want to help everybody, but that question of do no harm across all medical fields and even the paraprofessionals like herbalists. So we have to know when it's time to send somebody to the ER. We need to know when we're like, I don't like the look of that. And you need to go get that looked at because this isn't my area of expertise. I do that a lot with skin stuff. When somebody's like, oh, what do you think this is? I was like, I can guess all day long, but if it matches any of those basic criteria of what skin cancer looks like, I'm like, you need to go get that looked at. And don't trust, don't think I know everything about everything. I know a lot about a lot of things, but I also know when it's like, I don't know enough about that to feel secure in giving you advice on it. So if you're just joining us, I'm Bob. And please let us know who you are and post your questions if you have any cool herbal questions, and we will throw them into the cycle here. Sorry, I just saw your last question on there. It's I would say somebody who's in recovery should not do tinctures. I'll do a tincture in a pinch. I personally, I don't have a problem with alcohol. But I find alcohol changes the medicine. I don't taste the medicine, I taste the alcohol too often. Because I work in the realm of energetics, that herbs, if there's like, oh, I need a cooling herb or a drying herb or something, alcohol, which makes up the bulk of a tincture, is hot and stimulating. And so it's fine. But what if I don't want heat? What if I don't want stimulating? And it's so interesting as our students, they learn pulse diagnosis. That idea of like, you can take somebody's pulse, and if you just like, oh, I don't know anything about pulse diagnosis, and you're like, what's the rate? Is it 60 beats per minute, 70 beats a minute, whatever? And it's like, does it feel weak or strong? And you're like, I don't know, feels like whatever. Then do one dropper of 100 proof alcohol. No herbs doesn't matter. Almost instantaneously, you'll feel it get forceful and more rapid. It'll go from 70 to probably 80 beats per minute, and some people higher. So every time we do a tincture, we're causing a reaction in the body from the alcohol and also from the herbs. So it is, I think tinctures are great. They're an easy way to administer herbs. Once you have a tincture made, it's quick. We can put it in our pocket. We can take it to work. No big deal. but I don't know that it's the best way to administer them. It's a preservative, right? So we can put a tincture on the shelf for years. Like everybody puts a 5-year expiration on it. Literally, they're good forever. I have tinctures that are over 20 years old, and those are just fine. Um, and so, yeah, I don't use a lot of tinctures at all. I primarily do either the Chinese herb where we have like instant coffee ice. It's a 5-to-1 concentrated granule that just dissolves in hot water. Um, I like teas, and for the really hardcore, I like decoctions. Or something we were talking about earlier was just like, just chew it up. And capsules are certainly an option. And hey, Carol, uh, oops, I just caught your question. For clearing throat congestions, um, funny, now I'm going to change everything I said. No. And so, throat congestion, one of the things I always say is we don't want to alleviate a symptom. I mean, we do, because no, it's crappy if you got postnasal drip and your throat is irritated more often than not. Is what's important is to recognize, like, how come I got throat congestion? And so it can come from chronic sinus thing where you're getting seasonal allergies that could be causing that drippiness in the back of the throat, nasal polyps, my scourge for myself. Thanks, military. Can cause a lot of congestion, and postnasal drip kind of backs up the system a little bit. Oddly, low stomach acid and high stomach acid, as well as a hiatal hernia, which is where your stomach, oops, sorry, you guys can't see that, where you're like, here's my diaphragm right at the bottom of my ribs, this is my esophagus, this is my thumb, and your stomach is right below your diaphragm. And so what happens is lifting weight, bending over funny, weak abs, pregnancy, pushes the stomach above the diaphragm and causes acid reflux. And it's a structural issue, not an acid issue. So all of those cause a sometimes silent reflux, is what it's called. It causes an irritation of the throat that causes a lot of mucus. And so it's important to identify the how or why something's going on. After that, I would say a tea would be my first choice, because we're putting it, if we're like, I just need some soothing from the irritation of my throat, I'd say you're physically touching the surface, whereas a capsule doesn't. Tincture's fine, but I will say alcohol may cause more irritation to the throat and could potentially aggravate it. If it's coming from a stomach issue, which is probably for chronic issues, that's one of the more common issues. Low or high stomach acid, I would actually say a tea is fine, but a capsule might be more convenient. And I think we've talked about it a few times in the past. The idea of low stomach acid. So if it's low stomach acid, the best, most effective treatment for that is taking hydrochloric acid pills, and those have to be taken in a pill form because it's hydrochloric acid, so you don't want that touching your skin on its way down. We want it to open up in your stomach so that it's safe and provides that proper pH balance in our stomach. Hopefully, Carol, that kind of made sense to you. I'm sorry, I'm cheating. I got to scroll up and make sure I didn't miss anything here. All right. Whoops, that's me. As usual, it did change some of the controls on here. They make it harder for me to see what's on here. And if you're just joining us, feel free to put something, ask a question in the chat. But I always like to know who's on there and where y'all are from. Every once in a while I get some folks from overseas, and I always think that's exciting. So, yay, I'm easily humored that way. Uh-oh, I see more. What's Heidi got here? Whoops. Come on, computer. There we go. Eating fresh spring. Yeah. It's funny. So we've got the food series class going on, and I have no idea when the next one is. It's sometime in the summer. I think July is the next food series. We just did the liver time or springtime. And we were kind of following the Chinese system, but I was looking at American foods and how we can get that healthy foods in. And eating seasonally in general is a thing. So, we grow watermelon, it's ripe in the summertime. And so when it's hottest out, we can use that to cool off. Like literally, I was out in the garden today shoveling way too many wheelbarrows of stuff and setting up for Green Thumb Festival. It was hot out. So I made sure I started with some watermelon and had some fruit snacks, because most of our fruits, not all, but most of our fruits are very cooling, they're moistening, they're full of fluids, and I never drink enough water. And so that becomes, like nature literally provides us the greatest collection of fruit in the time when we need it the most. If you live up north and you're like in Maine and you start importing watermelon from Florida or somewhere else, it actually, you don't want to eat a bunch of watermelon and go outside. It will literally cause pain and discomfort for you. I was telling somebody recently, if we look at the traditional foods of people who live near the equator, they're all super spicy foods, which would seem counterintuitive, because like, oh my God, I always break a sweat, your face turns red. But the reality is, what it does is all of those spicy foods open up your blood vessels and bring it to the surface. That's why our face turns red, and that's how our body regulates its body temperature. Literally, it's going to make you sweat, and so the body feels hot from the spicy food. It's not actually hot. So it reacts, and it causes greater evaporation with our bloodstream close to the surface of the body, and it cools it off a little extra. If we did that at the Arctic Circle, we would literally die of frostbite. And so what do we see when we go up to those northernmost, northern Canada? If we look at Siberia, we look at Scandinavia, those places, it's all potatoes and rice, very little spices, it's soups and stews, it's got lots of carbohydrates, lots of fat. It gives us this fuel that we need. Our body needs fuel to stay warm, where we try to conserve energy when we take siestas here in the South. I wish I took a siesta sometimes. And so eating our local things and our seasonal things can really be helpful, just as a health maintenance trick. Like, don't always say, like, what's in season this month in my community, what greens, what foods, and focus on what's been grown locally in your climate. There's an argument just for what you need at a particular time. Unfortunately or unfortunately, I can get asparagus in the middle of winter because we bring it up from South America. Like, I love asparagus, but I probably shouldn't be eating it all year round the way we do. Or maybe it should be pickled, and that sour flavor has a different property when we start to use it. And if you're just joining us, I see some more people jumped on. Feel free to put in a question, and I'll add it to the queue. I could do one more. I was starting the ethical harvesting practices of herbs, and it was funny. I had my senior students out on a canoe trip. We were on the Little Manatee River, and generically I'll say, without a permit, you cannot harvest out of any city, county, state, or national park. You can harvest off of your private property or a friend's private property with permission. If you're getting it from, hey, this guy's got 10 acres, I'd get some sort of written permission so you don't get arrested by the cops or anybody else. And here in Florida, actually, I think even outside of Florida, some plants are protected even on your own property. So things like saw palmetto, you can't harvest without a permit. We just had people arrested down in Sarasota County a couple of months ago, actually. If you're pulling a couple of handfuls for yourself, and you don't take it off your property and you tincture it right there, I don't think the police are flying over, the saw palmetto police. But you got a truckload with bushel bag full of it, you better have a permit or you're going to jail. That said, what I always think about, there's safe harvesting practices. Don't harvest your plants from the sewer outlet. there's different opinions. I'll generically say stay as far away from roads and railroads, sprayed areas. Stay as far away as humanly possible. If you're harvesting aquatic or swamp plants, make sure that the water source where they're growing is fairly clean and safe. I mean, nothing's clean anymore, I think. So that's safe harvesting practices. That's different from ethical harvesting practices. In different numbers are quoted, but while we were out on the canoe trip, we found some partridge berry. Really excited. I had been looking for some. I wanted to try to grow some here at the clinic, but there was only like 3 small plants right on the side of the trail, and I made sure everybody saw it, but I didn't want to harvest it because it was the only plants in the area. I'm sure if I went further in the woods or something, I could find it, but when there's only 1 or 2 of something, it should never be harvested. We need to allow it to continue to grow and reproduce. If I take it, then that particular region no longer has any plants. So making sure that the plants are always there when we need it. I've heard never take more than 10%. That's kind of the rule I go with. Some people say never take more than 1/5. But the reality is we need to leave some for the animals because they use it oftentimes for food, for forage. Animals know herbal medicine too, so they may be needing it for medicine. The next herbalist may come by either for themselves or something else. So if all of us get greedy and take every last plant in a particular area, then there's none out there for anybody else. So always make sure that you leave enough for the next few people to come by. And certainly for the animals, always look where there's I can't say it, where there's a lot of a planted area, not just a sparse 1 or 2. I'll always look to make sure there's plenty more around before I harvest a plant from the wild. And you know, we're lucky we can order stuff. Yay, just buy it here. We've got access to these. We don't have to harvest from the wild. So let's make sure that we're really looking out for that multi-generation access to these plants, that we're not depleting the forest in any particular way. Hey, we covered that. If you're just joining, I got one more person just showed up. Let us know who you are. Post your questions. And do I want to go into the next one? All right. I'm saving the really long one for the end, so hoping we got a couple of other good questions in here before then. I wanted to talk about ashwagandha a little bit. It's super popular. It was right after COVID, right before COVID, I don't know, somewhere around there. One of the, I'm going to say, one of the good herb companies out there that does a lot of manufacturing of formulas. I think the manufacturing director there and one of their formulators reached out to me. It was really nice. They paid me. And they were like, as a practitioner, what do you need? What do you see as the patterns or trends that you want to make sure that there's good products out there? And it's funny, adrenals, adaptogens are necessary and popular. So kind of we live in a stressful world. It's been more stressful in the last 5 or 6 years than I think, any time since like World War II maybe. And so everybody's a little stressed out, a little doubt, news fatigue. There's so many reasons why people are feeling more stressed out than usual. COVID was rough on everybody. And one of the simple things, you're like, oh, just get something, an adaptogen. An adaptogen formula helps you adapt to stress, and so it manages our stress a little bit better. It's kind of the same thing as an adrenal formula. Sometimes the adrenal formulas have a few different approaches. Your adrenal glands being that gland that sits on top of our kidneys that helps us address stress. But in particular, we need good sleep for our adrenal glands to function well. The idea being that when we get a little shot of adrenaline from our adrenals, it creates a lot of cortisol in our body, which is inflammation, which our cortisol levels go like this throughout the day. Our cortisol levels go up in the morning to say, oh, get out of bed, time to go to work, greet the day. And it goes down at night so we can go to sleep. And at night, in our deep sleep, is when a lot of our hormones in our body are processed out, cortisol being one of those. And so some of your adrenal formulas sometimes have a little different herb pattern that helps us process that cortisol out of our body, and sometimes they have some relaxing herbs in there so that we get a better night's sleep. Oddly enough, I always say I like, oh, excuse me, clearly I need some. I actually like to take a lot of my adrenal formulas at night. Not everybody can do it, but if you're able to take an adrenal formula at night, I think it actually makes for a deep, nourishing sleep that allows for those byproducts to be processed out of the body, rather than taking it in that handful of supplements that we all take in the morning. But what they said was, or one of the things I said, it was like, I would love for somebody to create an adaptogen or an adrenal formula that doesn't have ashwagandha in it. And ashwagandha, again, it's gotten really popular in the last 15 or 20 years. But before, we saw a lot of schizandra berry, we saw our ginsengs in there, we saw our milky oats in there. There's a whole slew of different herbs. A few of them had ashwagandha if they were really into Ayurvedic medicine, but now ashwagandha is everywhere. Nothing wrong with ashwagandha, except it's a nightshade. So the Solanaceae family. And so most people honestly can take nightshades. But I used to say 5%. I think it's up to 10%. I'm seeing so many nightshade sensitivities now. And nightshades are it's a plant family that has, it has chemicals in there that's meant as an insecticide. It protects the plant from a lot of the insect predators. And we see plants like, we talk about potatoes and tomatoes and eggplants, all of your peppers, so sweet pepper, spicy peppers, paprika, not black pepper is a different plant family altogether. So that's a fruit, or a different fruit on the piper plants. So ashwagandha is a nightshade, and there's debate as to whether people are reactive. I've watched people who don't know what's in their formula be reactive to it. The nightshades are in so many spice blends. They are inflammatory for those group of people who are sensitive to it. And so it's so hard, because of the popularity of ashwagandha, it's so hard to find one of those stress formulas that doesn't have it in there, and it drives me nuts. So we always have to make our own, and ideally we should be creating customized formulas for people who are dealing with stress in their life. So ashwagandha is great. It's also not meant to be taken long term. So usually like 6-8 months, you're kind of maxed out with it. It is for long-term stress or depletion, i.e. somebody's exhausted, they've been burning the candle at both ends, and they're not getting the restful sleep. It's also frequently used with fertility, and here's where it gets interesting. For people who are having a hard time getting pregnant, and it can be used by both men and women, it's used to nourish the body in order to make it possible for you to carry a baby to term or to get pregnant in the first place. But you're supposed to stop taking it when you get pregnant. And a lot of people don't know to stop it. It's like, no, I took it, this is why I got pregnant. That's cool. It's contraindicated in pregnancy because it is not something we're supposed to take. It is a good long-term use herb, i.e. it's more than just a week or two, but it's not meant to take forever. Obviously, if we've depleted our body from bad behavior, we should be looking at ways to stop burning the candle at both ends so that we don't need an herb to prop us up as we go through our day. It's so funny because it's one of the ways that we misuse herbs. The idea of, I'm going to take this stimulating herb, like Coffee, great herb. It's actually a scheduled drug if you don't know it. Look up caffeine on DEA. I think it's a Schedule 3 drug. I forget. It's not scary, obviously, but hospitalizations happen from too much caffeine, and that can be just too much coffee. So instead of saying, "Ooh, I need coffee to pass this test," we use it every single morning. So because we didn't get enough sleep the night before. So the misuse of ashwagandha to help us push a little harder and do a little less damage to our body. No, use it to repair the body while we change our behaviors and take better care of ourselves and get more rest. So, I'm guilty. All right, we've got close enough to 7 o'clock. We've got a few more questions on here if you're just joining us. Stay tuned. This is a short commercial break, and go ahead and you feel free, if you're just joining us, to post your questions. Let us know who you are, where you're from. If you don't know, I'm Bob Linde from Traditional School of Herbal Studies, Acupuncture and Herbal Therapies, and believe it or not, we have another event going on right now. We have the trade blanket going on in the back. We have lots of acupuncturists and herbalists here. Yay! So we have practitioners here 6 days a week. For acupuncture and herbal therapies, you can find out more about it at acuherbals.com. And we've also got an intern clinic here 3 nights a week, so it's a reduced rate way to get access to good alternative care. Monday night, I supervise acupuncture interns from Dragon Rises. Tuesday night are our Western herb students getting practice, and Wednesday night is my Chinese herb students. They're getting practice, and they're supervised by either me or one of the other senior practitioners here. And we've got a ton of classes, Traditional School of Herbal Studies. You can see so many good things coming up. Pretty much every Thursday, Friday, and every weekend, we've got something here. The Thursday night and Friday night classes are really open for everybody, but some of them are required for our students, but most of them are just people who just want to put their toe in the water and learn a little something extra. The weekend classes, some of those are open to the general public, but most of them are for folks who are in either the Western or Chinese herb program. I'm excited to say, for any of you who love herb conferences, and I love herb conferences. They're usually in cool places where we can go and play in the woods. This one's in Black Mountain, North Carolina. It's one of my faves, and this is my first year teaching there. I'm going to be talking about hypermobility, EDS, Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, and there's a discount code. Yay, me Linde 26. I did not make that up. Register online. We have nothing to do with it, but I'm teaching about the hypermobility, also about lesser known food sensitivities, and I'm on a discussion panel for herbs in aging population. I always like the discussion panels because I just get to sit there and play off of the other herbalists and raise interesting ideas. I'll do some sort of troublemaking for that. I'm also excited. Starting next month, I'm actually teaching a class for Dragon Rises. I'm teaching Western herbalism for their senior students there. So they've been bugging me to come teach there for a while, and so they suckered me in with that one. No, I'm super psyched to be doing it, kind of rewriting the curriculum. I'm happy to say they even changed the textbook for me because I like the guy who wrote their textbook, but I didn't think it was a good textbook that they could hold on to and use going forward. So I always say, if we're going to spend money on a textbook, let's make sure it has use outside of the college classroom for that as well. And of course, Herb Day, not tomorrow Saturday, but May 2nd, a week from tomorrow, is National Herb Day. It's our 20th annual Herb Day event. It's a free event here in St. Petersburg, 6340 Central Avenue. There's parking on First Avenue North and South. Usually the bank parking lot and the church across the street are very kind to let us use theirs without any hassle. There's two lectures areas going on all day. Check out the Facebook page for Traditional School of Herbal Studies, and you'll see the whole class lineup. I know I'm only teaching one this time because we had so many people interested in teaching. I'm doing an herb walk right at 10:15 that morning. So if you want to go on about a 45-minute herb walk, come on down. There's also music going on all day, and I cook a bunch of weird medicinal foods for everybody. Chicken feet and black chicken white phoenix soup and 8 treasures congee. And I really don't know what else I'm going to teach. So, or what else I'm going to cook up for everybody. All right, I got one more on there. And y'all are a quiet bunch today. If you've got any questions, throw them into the chat, and I hopefully will see them and say words about them. So this is one, and Stevie, if you're still on there, you've asked me this 10 times to do more on this one. And that's about the specific indications of herbs. So there's lots of ways when we think about herbs, when we ask ChatGPT, when we read whatever article or whatever, they go, this herb is good for. And herbs are more than that. And I will say there's something to be said for this. This is a good cold and flu herb. But there's 2 primary ways that I like to talk about herbs, teach about herbs, and I really encourage people to learn herbs in this format. And one is based on energetics. That's a way more involved process because we have to be able to identify and understand the nature of somebody who runs hot versus somebody who's cold, somebody who's more damp or wet and the person who's more dry, the person who's deficient versus excess, tense versus lax. That takes a while to figure that junk out. And like, what does tense look like? What does lax look like? And what happens when we combine them together? And how does that look different? But the other way that's equally as valid is so often you're like, here's a list of the 20 herbs that are good for cough. And so people just take all 20 herbs and throw it in there, or the one that's they saw on TikTok the most, mullein for everybody with a cough. And it's not actually the way those herbs are used. Herbs are usually used in combination, in formula, although there are plenty that are used as a single. Usually you're putting 3 or more herbs together to address a pattern of stuff. But the other way to think about herbs, and I would say a little bit easier, I think we still need to know some cautions and contraindications, but specific indications. And there was I forget which one of the older herbalists, but it was this idea, and some of you have probably heard me say this before, passion flower is for circular thinking. And so if we say, ooh, what's passion flower good for? Oh, it's anxiety. It's good for sleep. It's good. It's not actually. It's great for circular thinking. And how do we identify that? So passion flower has nothing to do with passion and sex and things like that. It's actually a crown of thorns, passion of Christ. That's what it actually alludes to. But I use passion flower for male impotence because so often there's performance anxiety, so they're not able to perform, not because of blood flow, not because of testosterone, because they overthink it. And so if they're sitting there, oh, I hope I do everything right, I hope I do everything right, it's great for that. And that can also be true for women, that they get caught up in their own head thinking about doing things right, and that becomes the circular thinking. So it's wonderful for that circular thinking, and that's where it shines, where you'll get great success without having to go through the whole list of anti-anxiety herbs. That can be what keeps you up at night. Like, oh, I've got this big project tomorrow. I hope I don't forget this. And you're like hyper obsessive about that one thing. Passion flower. The opposite of that is valerian. So valerian is for 1,000 thoughts. So it's like, ooh, look, our rose is a little low. I hope we got some more rose back there. And, oh, I hope there's a few people who showed up for trade blanket today out by the tea truck. I don't know. It's like, I got to do this thing next week. And that's what's keeping us up at night. And that's the right herb. So valerian is specific for 1,000 thoughts intruding into your mind. And so that might be ADD, ADHD. That might be insomnia. But such a distinct thought pattern, different thought pattern between passion flower and valerian. And where it gets interesting, I always tell my students there's a small number of people who will have, oops, what happened there? Oh, there we go. There's a small number of people who will take valerian and not sleep for like 2 or 3 days. Those are the people who are hyper focused. So valerian, great herb, but never for that type A hyper focused person. So it's so important to pay attention to and ask people like, okay, you say you have anxiety or your brain keeps you up at night or doesn't allow you to focus. Is your brain focusing on one thing or 100 things? And that allows you to quickly select the right herb. And I won't say every herb is as specific as that, but it can be as specific as that for so many of the herbs. Well, let me see what you got here. I'll do more of those as we go, but I'd rather answer all y'all's questions as we go through here. Treating diabetes by addressing fatty liver along with dietary changes. Okay, fatty liver is a pain in the butt. That takes a long time to address. That's not a quick fix. So obviously getting and there's non-alcoholic fatty liver disease that frequently comes from too much sugar. It's not limited to that. Any kind of chronic inflammation can lead to fatty liver disease. Obviously, if there's non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, there can also be alcoholic fatty liver disease. So alcohol would be a good starting point. And for somebody with diabetes, alcohol is a big no-no. Getting the blood sugar under control through diet and exercise. And I should always preface that. Type 1 diabetes is its own special challenges. Type 2 diabetes is the one that we see most commonly and the one we can have the most dramatic impact from. So I'm kind of mean with my diabetics. I treat it as an eating disorder / addiction. If we had somebody who was shooting up heroin, we're like, man, if you keep doing that, you're gonna like literally have a heart attack, you're gonna die, you won't poop for a week. But literally people who inject heroin or snort heroin, they don't have a long life expectancy. If I continue to eat yummy, sugary things, and I go, you're going to go blind, you're going to be impotent, we'll cut your feet off, and we're going to take at least 10 years off your life, and you keep eating all the yummy stuff, that starts to be an addiction, right? That's making choices that are against the better judgment of your own health and well-being. And it's easy to shame people for things like drugs and alcohol, but we don't shame people, and we don't want to shame them, but it's like, I also say it's like, oh, here, have a beer, and we can put pressure on. You're like, no, dumbass, they're a recovering alcoholic. Don't do that. But I can know that somebody's diabetic. I was like, oh, it's just one cookie. And nobody yells at me for that. So I think it's really important to recognize there's an underlying reason that we need to address to make that process easier for people to get through that. And that can be a mental health counselor. That can be a registered dietitian. A lot of them really focus on diabetes and start to look at that mental emotional connection. I think there's hormonal imbalances that have a lot to do with that. People with low stomach acid frequently can only digest carbohydrates, so they kind of get hooked on it just like they would heroin. So I think it's really important to let's make sure the body is as balanced as possible so the efforts can be put into it to correct things like the fatty liver disease. Then trying to kind of and it is baby steps, no, don't do sugar and refined carbohydrates, they're bad. Despite what the American Diabetic Association says, they actually tell you can have some refined sugars, you should limit it. That's a quick way to get more drugs, right? You're going to need more medications, you're going to be injecting insulin before you know it. I think they have some of the worst advice in the American Diabetic Association. And I'm going to jump up on my soapbox for a second. The number one sponsor for Juvenile Diabetes Association, Dunkin' Donuts. For real, every one of the support runs is sponsored by Dunkin' Donuts, and they put donut holes in coffee out there with sweet and low and sugar and a bunch of other crap out there. So I have such issue. I guess they're doing their penance for destroying so many people's lives. Even though I do like donuts. There's a conundrum, huh? So, sorry, I digress. I love bitter melon for diabetes in general. It is challenging to get people to eat it because it is aptly named. Bitter melon is intense. Anytime we're adding herbs in where somebody's on diabetes medication or should be on diabetes medication, it's important to understand that low blood sugar is just as dangerous as high blood sugar. So they have to be testing. I'm a huge fan of the constant glucose monitors you put on like the back of your arm because you can see how specific foods are affecting your blood sugar. We had some of the staff here. I thought it was cool. They were not diabetic. They were like, I want to see how foods affect me. And so they were tracking it very carefully, and things like oatmeal that are oftentimes recommended for diabetics or general health. For this particular person, and it's not true of every person, it would spike their blood sugar like immediately afterwards and set them off. They would get fatigued. They would be setting them up on a roller coaster ride. It really was shocking. And I'd say herbs kind of work the same way. Some things that we say are good for blood sugar work really well, like bitter melon. Other ones, like guava, is talked about for it, didn't do a thing. So it was really interesting way to see what worked for some people but not others. I really like Genema sylvestri, and because I made a joke about I like donuts. I probably like ice cream more than donuts. Donuts are a little too sweet for me. But the reality is there's a physical response to sugar. We get a little bit of a high off of sugar. Like it's not a lie. But it also tastes really good. And so if we can at least take the taste away from it, then it can have kind of a dramatic effect. So Genema sylvestri, it's an Ayurvedic herb called gumar. Sorry, nobody knows what I just said. Gumar, the destroyer of sugar. It makes the sugar not taste good. And so I always say like 15, 20 minutes, like I eat generally pretty healthy. Honestly, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, I do all right. I'm not perfect by any stretch of the imagination. If I'm doing student clinic at night, I roll into the house about 10:30. I do not make good food choices. And so that's where my trap lies. It's like, oh, all of a sudden I want to sit up and eat convenience food. I want guac and chips or something yummy like that. And so if I wanted to prevent my success at eating those yummy foods, I would drink my Genema sylvestri here at the clinic as I'm heading home. So when I reach for those chips, that first bite, they wouldn't taste right, and I'd not eat anymore. And so that really, I think that can be key in that process. For the fatty liver specifically, there's a number of things that help. I like alpha-lipoic acid. For diabetes in general, it helps with the diabetic neuropathy. I would argue any kind of neuropathy. It actually has a positive effect on blood sugar, and A1C. It's pretty well documented, and will help ever so slowly because fatty liver didn't happen overnight, and you're not going to fix it overnight. But it will start to break down some of that visceral fat that's such a problem. I like milk thistle, and I would argue any thistle will do in a pinch. So artichoke is a real win. Western herbs, I love cleavers and chickweed. Uh-oh, you get me all fired up there, Heidi. Oh, I will go off on that tangent in a minute. Oops. Yeah. Do the hot dog companies sponsor leukemia? That's horrifying if they do. Yay, I'm glad they're getting some of the profits. What other herbs do I like for fatty liver disease? Dandelion, burdock. We said milk thistle. Those are probably my favorite. There are definitely other ones. The biggest thing is really, somebody who's got type 2 diabetes probably on a bunch of meds. And so working around those meds can be a trick. So always making sure that we're not interfering with the meds, that we're checking the blood sugar as you go. Um, and really looking at the change in diet. I would say exercise has a role, and not just like, ooh, go out and run a marathon every day. I would say you can actually have fatty liver disease and run a marathon. Um, I would say a mix of aerobic and non-aerobic exercise. We want to create some muscle mass as well to continue working. Um, Huge challenge is also getting a good night's sleep. A lot of the general visceral abdominal fat comes from sleep apnea or not getting good deep sleep. So anything that helps with sleep. The CPAP, it's so funny. We all associate obesity with type 2 diabetes, but the reality is you can be thin as a rail and be diabetic. Um, and so more common, and also with sleep apnea, more common in people who are overweight or obese, but you can be thin as a rail and have certain types of sleep apnea, and that's where you stop breathing in your night. It's linked to heart disease, but it also means you're not getting the deep sleep that you need to get rid of your cortisol. And that cortisol is that, twig legs with the big basketball belly. That's cortisol. That's oftentimes visceral fat, which includes fatty liver disease. I actually had, it was like borderline fatty liver disease. It wasn't a blood sugar issue. It was because of high iron levels caused inflammation in my body that caused some of that accumulation. So once I fixed my underlying inflammatory condition, diabetes is another inflammatory condition, things got better, and I can see every 6 months I get an ultrasound, and they're like, oh, it gets a little bit better every time. I will say, I don't usually push supplements, but I said the alpha-lipoic acid, acetylcysteine is good, and glutathione. The liposomal, ideally injected glutathione, helps reduce inflammation, repair the body, and a lot of the detoxification, the two-stage detoxification with the liver. There's some decent research out there. It's funny, I spent an hour or so just this week listening about alpha-lipoic acid. I was exploring some interesting things with that. I'll also say, for folks who enjoy cannabis, weight loss, if you're a regular cannabis user, weight loss will put some of those compounds into your bloodstream, which will show up hot on a piss test, so be cautious around that. That's a question I get a lot, and I was like, oh, I got to clean up everything, I'm getting a job, they're going to do a urinalysis for stuff. And I was like, don't lose any weight, drink some water, stop smoking, you'll be fine. Lynn, hopefully that, I know I was a little all over the place on that, but hopefully that helped answer your question. And it's funny, and I said something that may not have made a lot of sense. There's so many reasons why people have type 2 diabetes. Obviously, where TV and the internet tells us to eat all these yummy things, and the convenience of drive-through, and we all sit behind our computers and don't get enough exercise. Yeah, there's a lot of that. There's we see families of diabetes and obesity, so there's some level of learned behavior with all that. But I see a lot of at least obesity, and frequently that will lead into type 2 diabetes, and they were thin when they were younger, they had a lot of stress in their life, and what can happen from a long-term stress is that your stomach acid stops being produced. And for those of you who've been on here before, you've heard this crap before, but it's always good to hear it again, because we don't associate it directly with diabetes. But if you don't have any stomach acid, add to that people who are on long-term use of acid reflux meds, your PPIs and H2 blockers, especially the PPIs, or people who are doing alkaline water consistently. That means you've destroyed your stomach acid. So you can't break down protein, and that's plant or animal protein. It doesn't matter. We need stomach acid to break our proteins down into amino acids for our body to utilize for fuel in our body. We also start to deplete our B12, and folks who are diabetic or have low stomach acid are frequently low on B12, which means they're fatigued. Metformin, the first line, although I'm seeing metformin less and less, and we're seeing the GLP-1s being used more and more, both of those deplete B12 and do other, the GLPs do some other weird things. So everybody who is like walking that line even should get their B12 levels checked. So see if you guys can follow me on this big long circle. I got stressed out for a year and my stomach acid disappeared, but I'm eating protein, which is a good, sustainable, slow burn energy. But because I don't have any stomach acid, I'm fatigued because I'm not getting benefits from the food I'm getting. What doesn't need stomach acid is carbohydrates. So I then start to switch from protein and fats providing me with my healthy energy day to day, and I switch to rice and pasta because that I can break down even if I have low stomach acid. And it sets us up on I need these easy refined carbohydrates in order to get my day-to-day energy just to function. And they don't know that it's, yeah, there's addiction to that and blah, 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 blah. It's convenient, it's easy, but they don't know that, like, even if they change their diet, they'll feel horrid because they can't break down those proteins. So it's so important that we identify what the reason is why somebody is being challenged to make good food choices with the whole thing. And sometimes it is, we learned bad behaviors. It's hard when you're broke to, like, no, go buy, a whole chicken or turkey. That's tough when you don't have enough money. Rice is cheap. It's the cheapest thing in there. Pasta's super cheap. So it is such a important thing to recognize where are your roadblocks to making good decisions. And that may be a physical medicine health issue like low stomach acid, and it's way more common because it's not really talked about in Western medicine. It's like, you got acid reflux, here's some acid reflux meds. Oh, those didn't work, triple it up. And the reality, if acid reflux meds don't work for your acid reflux, it's either low stomach acid, which I find is more common than high stomach acid, or it's a hiatal hernia, which you need imaging, and then it needs to be corrected. The structure needs to be corrected. Hiatal hernias are not an acid issue, they're a structure issue. And finally, in the last few years, I've started to see doctors actually recommending surgery for a hiatal hernia, and I support that. Like, surgery totally creeps me out, although I want to be a surgeon. But surgery is a big deal, even though it's not as big a deal as it used to be. In the case of a hiatal hernia, if you can't fix it, honestly, I recommend chiropractic care for hiatal hernias or physical therapy. I actually think chiropractors are better at that in particular. They're a little aggressive, but it's actually good. But if it doesn't work, surgery is probably the best thing. Stress, carbohydrates, and autism spectrum disorders. Boy, there's a question and a half. For sure, stress and, like, it's funny, short and long-term stress, like, there's cool physiological connections to some of this. So if you almost get in a car accident, you're like, you don't actually get in a car accident, right? So you're like, you get this rush of adrenaline. So those adrenal glands, we talked about those earlier, squish out all of this adrenaline. And adrenaline speeds up your heart rate. It actually contracts your blood vessels to increase your blood pressure, and it dumps sugar into your bloodstream. And we hear about those, moms who pull the car off the train tracks in superhuman strength. That's the power of a surge of adrenaline and the surge of glucose into your bloodstream. And so what happens when we do that, we've all been there. You almost got in a car accident. All of a sudden, you're like sweating and you're shaking and crying. Those are all normal physiological responses to a spike in blood sugar, and then it starts to drop really fast. So, if we have short-term stress, no big deal. Long-term stress, that same thing happens, but we stop and notice and we don't respond to it. And so we try to feed this long-term surge of adrenaline in our body. It runs out of glucose. We give it its quick access to it, refined carbohydrates. There is an argument for, and there's no set answer for autism spectrum. Like it is, we see it more for everything from they changed they opened up to include a wider range of autism spectrum. But a lot of times I ask, and I won't say I always go this with every client, and not just with autism, any number of diseases. When we see atypical, like we're like, that pattern doesn't make sense. I don't see where this came from. We can actually go in utero and say, what was mom's life like while she was carrying a kid who ends up autism? And not to blame mom. Some pregnancies is peaches and cream. Other ones are a lot of stress. And so when that stress gets extreme, remember the bloodstream with the baby and the mama is being shared. And so they are sharing those stress hormones the same way. You'll hear a lot of people talk about the HPA axis, the hypothalamus, pituitary adrenal HPA. There we go, adrenal complex. And those glands all share their hormones, and those are part of our fight or flight response and all of that. So those hormones pass through the placenta and share with the baby. So if mama's stressed, so is that fetus. And so you can get caught into that fight or flight system where our vagus nerve is no longer in control, and those kids come out like that. And that is causing that craving for sugar to feed that adrenaline that may cause some kind of unique developmental issues with all that. And so it might be not as like, oh, why is my kids all screwed up with autism spectrum? Like, what was life like for mom during her pregnancy? And not like, ooh, I had a bad day. Not that. Like, months of stress sometimes are happening while they're pregnant, that their endocrine system is wacky, which means they're sharing those hormones with the kids that might set up sensitivity to carbohydrates, or even cause, our brain needs a lot of sugar, our brain needs a lot of fat. If we're not able to break those down in the right times, it can set up some yucky stuff for that kid further down the line. I have a couple of patients where we trace back their long-term anxiety and stress because they've had it since the day they were born. It was like, but their mom was going through abnormally high stress while they were carrying their child. So it's a oddball kind of scenario that take care of your pregnant moms. So we don't have any of that crap. We all need to go live in caves. The eternal question: what herbs are good for stress? Right on. Let me make sure I didn't miss anybody else there. Yeah. Oh, with a plate. I've never actually heard of that. That's kind of cool. So, what herbs are good for stress? All of them. No. When we think about stress herbs, there's kind of a couple of different ways we can approach that. Stress herbs, we have our nervines, and so that's a huge category of stuff. I'll rattle them off here in a second. And then our adaptogens. So a nervine usually helps to normalize the nervous system, and those can be either sedating or nourishing. And then our adaptogens help us adapt to the stress, because the reality is, although there's no more saber-toothed tigers, like, no, there's family stress, there's work stress, there's political stress, there's financial stress, like stress. So stress is kind of inevitable. It makes us get out of bed and go to work. It motivates us to do the things we got to do sometimes. But how we handle the stress sometimes is our ability to utilize adaptogens to make that easier to process that. So your adaptogens, there's so many, and there's great opinion on what is or isn't an adaptogen. The way they test for adaptogens is kind of creepy and a tad unethical. They take a mouse with no adaptogens, they drop in water and see how long they can tread water. They drop another mouse in who's been fed adaptogens. If he takes longer before he panics, and in my mind, I'm assuming they rescue all the mice before they drown. But if it allows them to maintain their stress level in treading water in a bucket, then that's a good adaptogen. So your ginsengs, there's American and Chinese ginseng. American ginseng is more cooling and moistening, where Chinese ginseng is more warming. Chinese and Korean ginseng, same thing. The Chinese think theirs is better, the Koreans think theirs is better. It's the same genus and species. There's a Prince Seng root, which is kind of, I call it Japanese ginseng, but there's more than one thing. That's Taizi Sen in Chinese, which is more yin nourishing. I'll write that up there because I don't remember the Latin name. Taizi Shen. There are things like Schizandra berry, which is used in both Western and Chinese. It's easier for me to spell the Chinese name. Hu Wei Zi is the Schizandra berry. What other adaptogens do I like? A lot of your mushrooms are adaptogens. Ashwaganda is an adaptogen. It's one I don't like to use long term. Eleutherococcus, what's known as Siberian ginseng, is an adaptogen. I'm staring at the wall like, what other adaptogens have I got up here? Those are the biggies, I would say. There's probably 30 more. There's a couple of, David Winston has a nice book on adaptogens. I don't agree with everything he puts in there, but I don't agree with 100% with anybody. So, that's me just being full of myself. I call wood betony. I might call wood betony or the Florida betony, the rattlesnake root. I might actually call that an adaptogen. Shatavari, yeah, Shatavari is I would call that an adaptogen for sure. Which also then the Chinese herb, which is the same genus, different species, Tianmendong. But then your nervines, there are many. What am I first? So nourishing nervines, milky oats. Oops, I can spell really. Oats is not rolling oats. I like rolling oats, but they're not an adaptogen. Oats, let's try that again. There we go. Milky oats. And so milky oats is kind of the cream of the crop. It's harvested in like a 1 or 2 week window. When you squeeze the fruit and it spits out a milky substance, that's my primo nourishing nervine. Problem is, like, it has to be tinctured. It's expensive. Like, we order 40 pounds a year in advance. They call us up and say it's coming. We have to make sure we have enough high proof alcohol here. We share some of it with our students and graduates. But then we've got to like process it like that day, get set aside. We're making a ruckus in here. It's madness. And then we hope that we have enough to get us through the whole year. Then there's oat tops. Oat tops, not quite as good. It's close, but not quite as good as the milky oats. That actually, can be stored on the shelf and so forth. Oat straw, which is the leaves of the oat plant that are very mineralizing and nourishing, a little weaker. And then ultimately, in a pinch, eat some oatmeal. It's like bottom of the barrel, but it's a nice, moistening, nourishing nervine. Nervine. I like lemon balm. I like blue vervain. I'm looking at the list here. I like wood betony and Florida betony. No. There's got to be a couple. Passion flower falls into that. Valerian falls into that. Reishi mushroom, I would call that. Rose could fall into that category. There's so many. In a roundabout way, motherwort I could even call a nervine. Linden is a nervine. Holy basil. Oh, can't forget holy basil, my favorite. I would call holy basil both a nervine and an adaptogen. Everybody needs more holy basil. We make jokes around that here. Kava is technically a nervine. We said that one already. Is gotu kola nervine? I don't know. I could argue that one. I don't really use it as a nervine ever. I've heard it called that. Oh, St. John's wort. There. I know I'm forgetting an important one. I'll leave it at that. So there are many. Sometimes some herbs fall into one or more categories. Yeah, and holy basil, big time. Why is sometimes they just change this system for the worst? Yeah, and kava's, and it's funny. I wouldn't kava, in the same sentence we always got to say mitragynine. I'm going to say that because it's that controversial herb that guarantees that I will get kicked off. It also starts with a K. It will get me kicked off of YouTube, and it's so stupid because I'm very careful about how people should use it safely and so forth. Mitragynine is a mild nervine. I would not. It's a debatable one whether it's an adaptogen, but in higher amounts it causes anxiety for a lot of people. So energetics, it's like, do we just throw all of these nervines into a bucket and cure all issues? And I would say this is where energetics comes in. So milky oats, nourishing and moistening. So we need that dry, deficient person, and they could be hot or cold. So they could be anemic, which would be more cold, deficient, dry, or they might be menopausal, which might be a more hot, deficient, and dry. So we might combine other herbs in there. That's really the fun, the magic of herbalism and energetics of like, how do we put these things together? Do we just say, oh, let's just throw milky oats at everybody who's tired and has frazzled nerves? You'll get it right half the time. The other half the time you could have done better. So even, no, take my classes. But the reality is there's a lot of people out there who do a good job teaching about it. If we just start to think in those terms, you can find references online. I would argue that every traditional system, so medical does not take that into account. If we say this herb is good for, that's not taking into account things like energetic. But whether we're talking Chinese, Ayurvedic, all of the First Nations people in North and South America, Caribbean, and so forth. If we look at the Greeks, Anani, Tim, all of these people had some version of hot, cold, wet, dry, deficient, excess. And so it doesn't matter through which lens you evaluate it if you understand how those symptoms play together in that process of evaluating people. It allows you to choose one or two nervines, or here's where it gets really cool. Let's say you just think like holy basil is a great example. Holy basil is a little dry. It's for tense nervous system dysfunction. And so because it's a little dry, if you give it to somebody who's already dry, it can actually cause a little irritability and anxiety. So what would happen if we add something that's moistened in there? And like, cool if you got milky oats, but you could literally put marshmallow or hibiscus in there and get the same positive benefits of that. And that is the joy of knowing the energetics of the plant and putting things together. For all of my mitragynine and kava drinkers, both of those herbs are really dry. So I tell people all the time, add some marshmallow, add some slippery elm, add some hibiscus to those to counteract, or oat milk. Yeah, that's a great solution for it. Add that in there so if you're a regular drinker, you can avoid the negative side effects that can come from something that's too dry for somebody. And so, yeah, it's really, the more you start to understand this concepts of hot, cold, wet, dry, and whether you're saying Pitta, Vata, Kapha, whether we're saying Yin, Yang, Qi, doesn't matter. It's all the same stuff with different funny words. Really think about what does that person present as, and how do we understand the nature of the herbs that we're recommending? Does it match their pattern of imbalance? That's different from, this is good for stress. So really think outside the box about that a little bit. It's funny, oh yeah, all of those. And now, a quick side note on St. John's wort. I think St. John's wort's a great nervine, but not if you're on any medications. So if you're on birth control, don't take St. John's wort. If you're on any prescription med, is it for sure going to cause a problem? Nope. There's plenty of people who take it and don't have any side effects. But there's probably a 50% potential for your St. John's wort to interfere with medication. As an herb, for folks not on prescription meds, it's a wonderful, safe herb. And so it's like there's a lot of fear around it. It shouldn't be fear so much as knowledge of, oh, nope, there's a good chance of it interacting with the medication. But there's plenty of people out there who aren't taking any medications. And for them, if they're having kind of a dark cloud over them, and feeling a little out of sorts, it's 100% safe to take. And I will also say, going back to Linde's question about diabetes, I love the alpha lipoic acid for diabetic neuropathy. Also, St. John's wort infused oil topically on diabetic neuropathy, nerve pain in the feet in particular, is a great, and it's not like one time and it's cured. Once or twice a day applying St. John's wort oil for the diabetic, and I would say any kind of neuropathy. It can be chemo-induced, oddly enough, you asked that question too. Chemo-induced neuropathy, it's super appropriate to use that as well. And when we use the herbs topically like that, we don't have to worry about the herb-drug interactions. So that's generally accepted to be safe. All right, if you're just joining us, sorry, I went off on a crazy-ass tangents there. If you're just joining us and have any questions, please post your questions in the chat. Otherwise, I'm going to go off on crazy another few minutes on stuff on the specific indications. I much prefer answering everybody else's question. And if you don't know, we do this ideally on the last Friday of every month. Occasionally we have to move it. Occasionally I'm out of touch. There's been a few times where I was out in the woods on the last Friday and I'm like, yeah, that's not going to happen. That I can't do the internet connection, or it's, I got to hide my tent because it's raining or something. So know that sometimes I'll no-show. If you don't know it, I also started doing this during COVID because I kind of missed talking to my people. And so we started doing this during COVID, and I've archived all of these on the school's YouTube channel. So you can go back and listen to the last, I don't even know how long it's been, 5 or 6 years. You can go back and listen to those. There's some good information. One of these days I'm going to, have a whole week with nothing to do and go through and pull out like the little snippets of stuff, because we spent 5 or 10 minutes talking about diabetes and so forth. I need to create those as a bunch of shorts, so it's on the list with the other 400 things I need to do. If you haven't been to our YouTube page, I highly recommend it. If you didn't catch it earlier, I think I mentioned it when we first started, but I know some of you came in later. I'm doing a free herb drug interaction class coming up on June 5th. You do need to register for that. Even though I think we'll be doing it, we're going to be doing it on Zoom, so you can do that live and in person, but there's limited space, so please, please, please register for in person. Um, but we have an unlimited number of people we can have online on Zoom, and we'll send you the recording afterwards. So it's one of my favorite subjects. I think it's important that herbs are great. As much time as it allows, I'll talk about not just negative herb-drug interactions. I'll talk about specific risk factors for some of those issues. Time allows, I always like to talk a little bit about positive herb-drug interactions. Herb-drug interactions has such a negative connotation, but and it's not herbs, but some of my favorite examples is like if you take an antibiotic, please take a probiotic. It'll minimize your side effects of yeast infection and bowel yuckiness and so forth. If you're taking a statin drug for cholesterol medications, I always encourage you to take a CoQ10. It minimizes some of the downsides of all of that. But we can do that with herbs as well. As we start to understand energetics, as we start to see patterns of things arise, we can use certain herbs to minimize some of the side effects, or to even make the herbs work better. So I always leave a little bit of time to talk about that, although I do tend to go off on tangents in case you hadn't seen that. I'm going to actually wrap it, unless anybody else has any other pressing questions. I'm going to go ahead and stop a few minutes early so I don't fall asleep. I hope I see all of you at Herb Day. It's worth the drive. Herb Day is a blast, tons of education, meet your community. The West Coast chapter of the American Herbalist Guild will be here, the Florida Herb Society will be here, a bunch of my graduates, a lot of people I don't even know will be here, but they're all got plants and herbs and herbal products and lots of good healthy stuff, and it's really a great time to connect with your community. We're kind of a unique crowd who thinks herbs are cool. Oh, now you show up, Daniel. Sure. Shut up, Dan. I'm just signing off. So, me. All right. I hope I see you all here in June, if not sooner, in one of the great classes. Go to traditionsherbschool.com to check out the myriad of classes for beginners and every other level. And go to acuherbals.com to find out about all the cool services and practitioners that we got here. And I hope I see you Green Thumb Festivals this weekend, or Herb Day. You better be there. Have a great weekend, y'all. Bye.